In 2020, this company was worth nearly $30 billion, more than Ford, and it had never sold a single truck. 5 years later, it filed for bankruptcy. Its workforce collapsed from 874 people down to exactly one, and its most famous product turned out to be a truck that couldn't drive itself down the road. Literally. They rolled it down a hill and filmed it coasting. And here's the part that should make every burned investor furious. The founder, who built that story, who was convicted of fraud for it, walked away with a full presidential pardon that erased roughly $680 million he owed his victims. And today he runs a private jet company. This is the story of Nikola, the loudest hydrogen truck startup of the SPAC era. How it went from Wall Street darling to a one-person liquidation, and why I think it's the clearest picture we have of what that entire bubble really was. Let's go back to the beginning. Nikola was founded by a man named Trevor Milton, and his pitch was enormous. He wasn't just going to build an electric truck. He was going to build hydrogen fuel cell semi-trucks, build a nationwide network of hydrogen fueling stations, and basically replace diesel freight in America. It was bold, it was green, and it landed at the exact moment the market was desperate for the next Tesla. In June of 2020, Nikola went public by merging with a shell company, a SPAC called Vecto IQ, and the market completely lost its mind. Within days, Nikola's stock rocketed. At its peak, the company was valued at almost $30 billion. For a brief window, it was worth more than Ford Motor Company, a business that had been building and selling actual vehicles for over a century. Now here's what nobody wanted to say out loud at the time. Nikola had no revenue. It had no truck in production. It had prototypes, promises, and a founder who was extraordinarily good on camera. That was it. $30 billion of market value, sitting on top of a company that had never delivered a product to a single paying customer. And then in September of 2020, the whole thing cracked open. A short-selling research firm called Hindenburg Research published a report with a title I'll never forget. It called Nikola an intricate fraud built on an ocean of lies. And the centerpiece of that report was a video. Back in 2018, Nikola had released a slick promotional clip of its truck, the Nikola One, cruising smoothly down a highway. It looked powerful. It looked real. It looked like a working hydrogen semi gliding under its own power. It wasn't. According to the allegations, that truck had no working powertrain. So, to make the video, they towed it to the top of a hill, let it roll down, and filmed it rolling, then presented it as a truck driving under its own power. The company later admitted the truck was, quote, in motion. It was in motion the way a boulder is in motion. Gravity was driving. Think about what that means. The single most important proof point, look, our truck works, was a truck that could not move on its own being filmed rolling downhill. The fallout was immediate. Within about 2 weeks of that report, Trevor Milton resigned from the company he founded. A major partnership with General Motors, which had sent Nikola's stock soaring just weeks earlier, was gutted down to almost nothing. And the regulators moved in. Here's where I want to be precise, because the details matter. The Securities and Exchange Commission and federal prosecutors investigated. In 2021, the company itself agreed to pay a settlement over the misleading statements, and Trevor Milton personally was charged with fraud. In October of 2022, a jury convicted him of securities fraud and wire fraud. In December of 2023, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The jury found what the short seller alleged, that Milton had lied to retail investors specifically about nearly every part of the business. The trucks, the technology, the reservations, the hydrogen production. He built a $30 billion valuation on statements a court decided were criminal. Now, you'd think that's the end. Founder convicted, story over. But this is where Nikola gets genuinely tragic, because the company kept going, and it actually tried to become real. After Milton left, new management took over and tried to do the thing the company had only ever promised, actually build trucks. And to their credit, they did build some. Nikola started producing battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell semis and getting them to a handful of customers. This was no longer a pure fantasy. There were real trucks on real roads. But here's the brutal reality of the car business, and it's the same lesson we just watched play out with Lucid. Building vehicles at scale is savagely expensive and savagely hard. Nikola was burning through enormous amounts of cash for every truck it made. It hit a battery recall after some vehicles caught fire. It had to raise money over and over, diluting the people who still believed. And it was trying to do all of this while carrying the single most toxic brand reputation in the entire industry. Every headline about Nikola came with the word fraud attached. You cannot outrun that, and in the end, they didn't. On February 19th, 2025, Nikola filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It listed over $1 billion in liabilities. The company that was once worth more than Ford went looking for a buyer, approached more than 20 potential acquirers and dozens of investors, and found no one willing to save it. What happened next is the part that really stays with me. The bankruptcy became a liquidation, a wind down, selling the company for parts. And as it did, Nikola's workforce, which had once been around 874 people, shrank and shrank until, according to reporting on the case, it was down to a single full-time employee, the liquidating trustee whose job is literally to switch off the lights. 874 to 1. The liquidation plan included an $83 million settlement with the SEC. And in a detail that tells you everything, when Trevor Milton tried to claim nearly $70 million as a creditor of the bankrupt company, the court pushed his claim to the very back of the line, citing his fraud and his breach of duty. Even in death, the company was still cleaning up his mess. And then there's the sale. Because when Nikola's assets went up for grabs, one of the buyers was a name you might recognize if you watched my last video, Lucid. The very same struggling luxury EV maker bought pieces of Nikola's carcass. One SPAC era EV dream picking over the bones of another. If you wanted a single image for what happened to that entire era, it's hard to do better than that. Okay. Now let me give you my honest take, because this is the part I actually care about. The SPAC boom of 2020 and 2021 was sold to ordinary people as democratized investing. Your chance to get in early on the next big thing, the same way venture capitalists do. And Nikola is the purest example of what it often actually was. A mechanism to take a company with no product, no revenue, and in this case, criminal misstatements, and hand it a $30 billion valuation funded largely by retail investors who trusted a confident founder in a promotional video. The people who lost money on Nikola were not sophisticated hedge funds. A lot of them were regular investors who believed they were backing the future of clean trucking. And they were the ones left holding a stock that went to essentially nothing. Which brings us to the ending that genuinely bothers me. On March 27, 2025, just weeks after the bankruptcy filing, Trevor Milton received a full pardon from President Trump. Now, whatever you think about presidential pardons in general, here is the concrete financial consequence. Prosecutors had been pushing for Milton to pay restitution on the order of $680 million to the shareholders he was convicted of defrauding. The pardon wiped that out. With the conviction erased, the court could no longer order him to pay his victims a cent. And what is the man at the center of all of this doing now? In late 2025, Trevor Milton acquired a private jet manufacturer called Cyberjet and installed himself as its chief executive. The founder, whose truck couldn't drive down a hill on its own, now sells aircraft. Let me be fair and give the other side, because I promised balance. There is a version of this where hydrogen trucking really is part of the future, where Nikola was simply too early and too badly led, and where the actual engineers who built those later, real trucks were doing serious work that got dragged down by one man's lies. That's true. The technology dream was not entirely fake, even if the founder was, and plenty of honest people at that company genuinely tried to build something and lost their jobs when it collapsed. They deserved better than the brand Milton left them. But here's my bottom line. Nikola is what happens when a story is allowed to outrun reality for too long. with too much money and too little proof. For a while, a good enough story plus a bull market can be worth $30 billion. It can beat Ford. It can make a founder a paper billionaire. But a story cannot actually move a truck. Eventually, something has to be real, and when it isn't, the value doesn't slowly decline. It goes to one employee turning off the lights. For the investors who believed, the lesson is expensive but simple. When a company's entire pitch is what it's going to do, and the proof keeps arriving as a video instead of a product, be very, very careful. Confidence is not a powertrain. If you got something out of this, subscribe. Every couple of days, I break down the business story everyone's about to be talking about, with actual facts instead of hype. And tell me in the comments, after everything you just heard, do you think the pardon was justice, or was it the final insult to the people Nikola left behind?